small game almost never came to exist, shaped from childhood afternoons spent catching beetles beneath summer trees and built from memories that would quietly grow into something that touched millions of hearts around the world. Its origins trace back to a quiet corner of Japan where an idea first took root, long before anyone imagined it would become one of the most influential games ever created. What began as a simple fascination with nature slowly transformed into a vision that would redefine handheld gaming and inspire generations of players. This is the tale of how Pokémon Red and Blue came to be. In a suburb of western Tokyo called Machida, there lived a child in the 1970s. His name was Satoshi Tajiri. Around him spread rice fields that swayed in gentle breezes. Rivers meandered through forests that had stood for generations. This was a world where nature still breathed freely, where children could spend entire afternoons exploring mysteries hidden beneath stones and leaves. Satoshi loved insects, not in the casual way many children do, but with a burning fascination that consumed his free hours. He watched the way beetles moved, studied their patterns, learned their secrets. While other children caught insects with honey spread on tree bark, Satoshi discovered something different. He noticed that beetles sleep during daylight hours, seeking shelter beneath stones where darkness lingers. So he would place stones under trees and return later, finding beetles clustered there like treasures waiting to be discovered. This simple innovation earned him more insects than any of his friends could collect. The neighborhood children began calling him Dr. Bug, a nickname spoken with equal parts admiration and wonder. But Satoshi's interests extended beyond the natural world. He loved Ultraman, the television series where heroes fought monsters, where battles decided the fate of cities. The combination of creature collecting and fantastic battles would, years later, form the foundation of something extraordinary. When Satoshi was around 13 years old, arcade halls began appearing in his neighborhood. Space Invaders captivated him immediately. The bleeps and bloops of early video games, the challenge of mastering patterns, the thrill of achieving high scores. He became as passionate about gaming as he had been about insects, perhaps more so. But there was a problem. In Machida, there was almost no gaming media, no magazines explaining secrets, no guides revealing hidden techniques. So Satoshi created his own. Around 1983, as he entered college, he began producing a handwritten magazine called Game Freak. Every page was written by hand, stapled together by his own fingers. The magazine contained tips and tricks for arcade games, strategies that Satoshi had discovered through countless hours of play. He sold copies in specialist bookstores for 200 yen each. The response surprised him. One issue sold over 10,000 copies. At a young age, Satoshi had created a successful business from pure passion. Among those who purchased Game Freak magazine was a young man named Ken Sugimori. Ken enjoyed the magazine's insights and reached out to Satoshi, offering his services as an illustrator. The two became fast friends, bonding over their shared love of arcade games. Together, they continued publishing Game Freak magazine, and together, they began to asking questions. Why were so many arcade games similar to each other? What would they do differently if given the chance to create their own game? These conversations planted seeds. Some readers of Game Freak magazine were programmers with access to development tools. Gradually, a community formed around Satoshi's publication. People gathered to talk about games, to share ideas, to dream about what might be possible. Satoshi grew increasingly frustrated with the quality of games available. He could recognize the difference between Good games and bad ones. His conclusion crystallized they should make their own games. And so Game Freak transformed from a magazine into a development company. But by the time this transformation occurred, Satoshi's neighborhood had changed dramatically. The rice fields had disappeared. The forests had been cleared. Housing facilities, office buildings, and stores now covered the land where Satoshi had once caught insects. The rivers that had meandered through his childhood had been straightened, contained, controlled. Satoshi thought about the children growing up in this urbanized landscape. They would never experience the thrill of discovering a beetle beneath a stone. They would never feel the mercy of catching a rare insect after patient searching. This realization sparked something in Satoshi's mind. What if he could give modern children access to that same feeling through a different medium? What if video games could recreate the sensation of exploring unknown territories, of discovering mysterious creatures, of collecting and studying them? The idea germinated slowly, waiting for the right technology to bring it to life. That technology appeared in 1989 when Nintendo released the Game Boy. Satoshi saw the handheld console's link cable capability and immediately recognized its potential. He visualized creatures moving through the cable from one Game Boy to another, like insects being traded between collectors. The image captivated him. This was how Pokémon could work. This was how children could share their discoveries with friends. The success of the Final Fantasy Legend on Game Boy convinced Satoshi that role-playing games could thrive on handheld systems. He began developing his concept in earnest, but creating Pokémon would prove far more difficult than anyone imagined. The development process would take 6 years, stretching Game Freak's resources to their breaking point and beyond. Satoshi pitched his concept to Nintendo in 1990. The response was lukewarm. Nintendo executives struggled to understand the appeal of collecting monsters. Why would children want to gather creatures they couldn't directly control in battle? Why would two versions of the same game make sense? The trading mechanic seemed like an unnecessary complication, but Nintendo agreed to publish the game, perhaps sensing something in Satoshi's passion, perhaps simply willing to take a chance on an unusual concept. Shigeru Miyamoto, creator of Mario and Zelda, connected Satoshi with a young composer named Junichi Masuda. Junichi would become essential to Pokémon's development, eventually serving as composer, programmer, and director. The early team was tiny. Satoshi, Ken Sugimori, Junichi Masuda, and a handful of others began the long journey of transforming a concept into a functioning game. Development started on the original Game Boy hardware. The system had severe limitations. 4 shades of gray for graphics, limited memory, weak processing power. Creating even simple sprites required meticulous planning. Every byte of data mattered. The team had to be creative, finding ways to compress information, to reuse assets, to make the impossible possible within the Game Boy's constraints. Financial struggles plagued the project from the beginning. Game Freak had almost no money. To keep the company alive, team members worked on other projects simultaneously. They developed games for other publishers, earning just enough to continue funding Pokémon's development. Satoshi personally went without salary for long periods. Some team members had to be let go. The team shrank from a small group to an even smaller one. The development process was exhausting. Team members worked impossibly long hours, driven by belief in the project despite mounting evidence that it might never be finished. They slept in the office. They survived on minimal food. The passion that had sparked Pokémon's creation now fueled their determination to complete it, no matter the cost. Designing the Pokémon themselves presented unique challenges. Each creature needed a distinct appearance, a memorable silhouette. Ken Sugimori drew inspiration from many sources: animals, mythology, everyday objects, abstract concepts. Pikachu, the electric mouse Pokémon, went through numerous iterations before reaching its final form. Originally much rounder and chubbier, Pikachu gradually became sleeker and more appealing to broader audiences. The decision to create 151 Pokémon seemed audacious given the Game Boy's limitations. Each Pokémon required front and back sprites, data for stats and moves, and unique characteristics. Fitting all this information onto a Game Boy cartridge demanded ingenious compression techniques. The team discovered methods to share data between similar Pokémon, to reuse graphical elements, to optimize every aspect of the game's code. One of Pokémon's most important features was the trading system. Satoshi wanted trading to be essential, not optional. The solution was elegant. Certain Pokémon would appear only in one version of the game. To complete the Pokédex, players would need to trade with someone who owned the other version. This decision would have enormous implications for the game's success, encouraging social interaction and effectively doubling potential sales. The trading system also introduced evolution through trading. Certain Pokémon would only evolve when traded to another player. This added another layer of social interaction, another reason for players to connect their Game Boys with link cables. The concept of Pokémon evolution itself drew from multiple inspirations: metamorphosis in nature, power-up systems in other games, the idea of growth and development over time. Creating the game's world required careful consideration. The Kanto region was designed to evoke the geography of real-world Japan, with cities, routes, caves, and bodies of water arranged in ways that felt natural, yet compact enough for the Game Boy's memory. Each town needed personality, despite the graphical limitations. Each route needed to feel distinct. Puzzles had to be integrated naturally into the environment. The battle system went through numerous iterations. How should attacks work? How should type advantages function? Fire beats grass, water beats fire, grass beats water. This basic triangle formed the foundation. But the team added more types: electric, psychic, fighting, ghost, and others. Each type needed strengths and weaknesses that made intuitive sense while maintaining strategic depth. Balancing 151 Pokémon for competitive battling was nearly impossible. Some Pokémon would inevitably be stronger than others, but the team tried to ensure that every Pokémon had potential value, that players could succeed with their favorites rather than being forced to use only the most powerful options. This balance was imperfect in red and blue, leading to some Pokémon dominating competitive play, but the attempt was made nonetheless. Naming Pokémon presented another challenge. Each name needed to be memorable, easy to pronounce, and somehow connected to the creature's characteristics or design. In Japanese, names often combined words or concepts in playful ways. Pikachu's name combined Pika, the sound of electricity sparking, with Chew, the sound a mouse makes. These linguistic puzzles made naming both challenging and fun. The game's story was intentionally simple. You play as a young trainer beginning your journey. A rival also starts their journey on the same day. Professor Oak gives you both starter Pokémon and Pokédexes. Your goal: to catch all Pokémon and become the champion. Along the way, you encounter Team Rocket, a criminal organization using Pokémon for selfish purposes. The story provided structure without overwhelming the core experience of exploration and collection. Music was crucial to establishing Pokémon's atmosphere. Junichi Masuda composed memorable themes for each town, each route, each significant moment. Despite the Game Boy's limited sound capabilities, Junichi created music that was catchy, emotional, and appropriate for each context. The battle theme pumped adrenaline. The Pokémon Center theme conveyed safety and rest. The rote music encouraged exploration. As development stretched into its fourth year, then its fifth, doubt crept in. Would this game ever be finished? Would anyone care about it if it was? The gaming landscape was evolving rapidly. By the mid-90s, 3D graphics were becoming standard on home consoles. The Game Boy seemed increasingly dated. Was there still a market for a 2D RPG on aging hardware? Satoshi remained convinced that gameplay mattered more than graphics. The core loop of catching, training, and battling Pokémon was engaging regardless of visual fidelity. The social elements would create lasting appeal. He pushed the team forward despite the uncertainties, despite the exhaustion, despite the financial pressures threatening to crush Game Freak entirely. There was a moment when everything almost ended. A bug in the code corrupted significant portions of the game's data. Weeks of work vanished in an instant. The team was devastated. Some questioned whether they could recover, whether it was worth continuing, but they persevered, rebuilding what was lost, implementing better backup systems, refusing to surrender when they had come so far. The deadline for completion kept being pushed back. Nintendo grew increasingly concerned. They had invested in this project, but the returns seemed further away than ever. Satoshi negotiated for more time, promising that the game was nearly complete, that it would be worth the wait. Months stretched into another year. The team worked around the clock, fixing bugs, balancing gameplay, polishing every detail. Finally, in February 1996, Pokémon Red and Green launched in Japan. The response was initially modest. Reviews were positive, but not ecstatic. Sales were decent, but not spectacular. The game seemed destined to be a minor success, nothing more. But something unexpected began to happen. Word of mouth spread among children. The trading mechanic worked exactly as Satoshi had envisioned, encouraging social interaction and creating a sense of community. As weeks passed, sales accelerated. Children told their friends about Pokémon. Schoolyards buzzed with talk of rare creatures and battling strategies. The Koro Koro comic magazine, popular with young readers, began featuring Pokémon content. A promotional campaign offering a mythical Pokémon named Mew through mail order drove enormous interest. Mew had been programmed into the game at the last moment, squeezed into a tiny bit of leftover memory space, and was intended as an Easter egg for developers. Instead, it became a phenomenon. The Mew promotion created a frenzy. 20,000 Mew were offered. Over 78,000 applications arrived. Children desperately wanted this rare Pokémon that couldn't be obtained through normal gameplay. The promotion demonstrated the power of Pokémon's collecting mechanic. Having almost everything wasn't enough. Players wanted to catch them all, truly all, including the rarest creatures. Sales continued climbing throughout 1996. Pokémon became more than a game. It became a cultural event in Japan. Merchandise appeared: plush toys, cards, stickers, clothing. An anime television series was commissioned, expanding Pokémon's world beyond what the Game Boy could display. The anime introduced Ash Ketchum and made Pikachu into the franchise's mascot, elevating a relatively unremarkable Pokémon into an icon. The success in Japan caught Nintendo of America's attention. Could this phenomenon translate to Western audiences? Initial reactions were skeptical. The art style seemed too Japanese. The concept of collecting monsters might not resonate with American children. The Game Boy was old technology by 1998 standards. But Nintendo decided to take a chance, localizing Pokémon for Western release. Localization presented enormous challenges. The games had been designed specifically for Japanese language and culture. Pokémon names were often puns or wordplay that didn't translate directly. The text needed to be rewritten for English while maintaining the original spirit. And there was a severe technical problem. English text required more memory space than Japanese text. The game was already packed to capacity. Fitting English text seemed impossible. The team worked miracles of compression and optimization. They restructured data, found unused bytes, rewrote code to be more efficient. Every character of English text was scrutinized to minimize length without losing meaning. The name entry system, designed for Japanese characters, needed complete redesign for the English alphabet. The Pokédex interface required restructuring. Months of technical work made localization possible, but there was another decision to make. In Japan, the games were Pokémon Red and Pokémon Green. For the Western release, they chose Pokémon Red and Pokémon Blue instead. The reasoning was cultural. In America, red and blue are considered opposite colors, rivals in sports and politics. Red and green lacked the same cultural resonance. This simple change in naming reflected careful attention to regional differences. The Western versions were actually based on Pokémon Blue, an enhanced version released in Japan after Red and Green. Blue featured improved graphics, including redesigned sprites for all Pokémon. It fixed numerous bugs that plagued the original releases. Using Blue as the foundation meant Western players received a more polished experience than the initial Japanese release. Before the games launched in America, the anime began airing on television. This was strategic. The cartoon introduced characters and concepts, building anticipation for the games. Children became familiar with Pikachu, with the basics of Pokémon battles, with the world of the franchise. When the games finally released in September 1998, demand was enormous. Pokémon Red and Blue became an instant sensation in America. Sales exceeded even the most optimistic projections. Schools tried to ban Pokémon cards, which only increased their desirability. Children traded cards at recess, discussed team strategies at lunch, connected Game Boys to battle and trade. The phenomenon replicated and exceeded what had happened in Japan. The dual version strategy proved brilliant. Many players bought both Red and Blue to catch all Pokémon themselves, or to have more trading options with friends. This effectively doubled sales potential. Critics might have called it a cynical money grab, but it worked because it enhanced the social experience. Having both versions made you more valuable as a trading partner. Pokemon's success defied conventional gaming wisdom. Graphics weren't cutting edge. The gameplay wasn't revolutionary in mechanical terms. But the combination of collecting, trading, battling, and exploring created something that resonated deeply with players. The games tapped into fundamental human desires, the urge to collect, the pleasure of completion, the joy of sharing experiences with friends. By 1999, Pokémon had become the highest-grossing media franchise in the world. Games, merchandise, the anime, a theatrical movie, trading cards, all generated revenue. But more than that, Pokémon created genuine cultural impact. It brought people together. It encouraged face-to-face interaction in an era increasingly dominated by solitary gaming experiences. Looking back at Pokémon Red and Blue's development, several factors enabled their success. Satoshi's childhood experiences gave him genuine emotional connection to the core concept. The long development time, while painful, allowed the team to refine every aspect. The Game Boy's link cable created natural social integration. The timing was right. Handheld gaming was popular, RPGs were experiencing a renaissance, and children were hungry for something new. But perhaps most important was the team's willingness to persist despite overwhelming obstacles. They could have given up when money ran out. They could have compromised their vision to release faster. They could have accepted that the Game Boy's limitations were too severe. Instead, They worked harder, longer, more creatively than seemed reasonable. They believed in Pokémon even when few others did. The technical achievements in Pokémon Red and Blue are remarkable, fitting 151 unique creatures with all their data onto a Game Boy cartridge required innovative compression. The trading system worked flawlessly despite the Game Boy's basic link cable capabilities. The battle system, with its type advantages and stat calculations, functioned smoothly despite limited processing power. Ken Sugimori's art gave each Pokémon distinct personality. Even in monochrome Game Boy graphics, players could distinguish between creatures at a glance. The designs were simple enough to work in low resolution, yet detailed enough to inspire imagination. When Pokémon were later rendered in color for other media, the designs translated perfectly because they were strong at their foundation. Junichi Masuda's music enhanced every moment. The opening theme immediately established tone. Town themes created specific moods. Pallet Town's music felt like home. Lavender Town's music was haunting. Celadon City's music was energetic. Battle music heightened tension. Victory music provided satisfaction. Despite hardware that could produce only simple beeps and tones, the soundtrack was memorable and emotional. The Kanto region became iconic. Players remember specific locations decades later. Viridian Forest, where you caught your first Pikachu. Mont Moon, where Zubots endlessly attacked. The SS Anne, where you could obtain Cut. Lavender Town's Pokémon Tower. Sylph Coping, where you battled Team Rocket. Victory Road leading to the Elite Four. Each location had character despite technical limitations. Certain gameplay decisions seem obvious in retrospect, but were innovative at the time, making HM moves permanent to encourage careful decision-making, requiring specific Pokémon types to access certain areas, encouraging diverse teams. Hidden items rewarding exploration. Optional legendary Pokémon providing goals beyond the main story. These elements worked together to create a game with surprising depth. The rival character served important narrative and mechanical purposes. He received the starter Pokémon that had type advantage over yours, ensuring battles stayed challenging. His appearances throughout the game provided difficulty, spikes that tested your team's growth. His eventual defeat was satisfying because you had faced him repeatedly. Simple but effective character design. Team Rocket, the antagonist organization, added narrative stakes without overwhelming the game's cheerful tone. They were threatening enough to provide conflict, but incompetent enough to be defeated by a child. Their schemes were simple: steal Pokémon, make money. This simplicity worked for the target audience while providing structure to the adventure. Gym leaders created clear progression markers. Each leader specialized in a type, teaching players about type advantages. Earning badges felt rewarding and unlocked new abilities. The escalating challenge from Brock's rock types to Giovanni's ground types created a difficulty curve that was generally well-paced, though some gym leaders were easier or harder than their position suggested. The Elite Four provided a climactic challenge. 4 powerful trainers, followed by the champion, tested whether your team was truly ready. The inability to leave and heal between battles added tension. Preparing for the Elite Four encouraged players to think strategically about team composition, movesets, and item management. Beating them felt like a genuine accomplishment. The Pokédex was central to the game's appeal. Every caught Pokémon added data: height, weight, description. Seeing the Pokédex completion percentage rise provided constant feedback on progress. The gap between current count and 151 motivated continued playing. Completing the Pokédex required trading, encouraging social interaction even for players who preferred single-player experiences. Evolution added progression within the collecting framework. Watching your Pokemon grow stronger and transform maintained interest over dozens of hours. Evolution tied emotional satisfaction to mechanical improvement. Players developed attachments to specific Pokemon, making decisions about whether to evolve them or keep them in current forms. Some players delayed evolution to learn moves faster. These strategic considerations added depth. The move system balanced simplicity with strategy. Each Pokemon could know only 4 moves, forcing choices about coverage and utility. Some moves were objectively better than others, creating optimization puzzles. But even weaker moves could have situational uses. The combination of move types, power, accuracy, and effects created more strategic depth than the basic presentation suggested. Status conditions, poison, paralysis, sleep, burn, freeze, added tactical layers to battles. Managing status became important in longer fights. Pokemon could only have one status condition, creating interesting decisions about which to apply. Full heal items could cure any status, but using an item wasted a turn. These systems interacted in ways that rewarded thoughtful play. The critical hit system added randomness that could swing battles unpredictably. Some players loved the excitement of lucky critical hits. Others found the randomness frustrating. The balance between player skill and random chance is debated among Pokemon fans to this day. But for a game aimed at children, some randomness helped less experienced players occasionally defeat stronger opponents. Catching Pokemon combined strategy with luck. Weakening Pokemon increased catch rates, but too much damage risked fainting them. Different Pokeball types had varying effectiveness. Status conditions improved odds. The satisfaction of catching a rare Pokemon after numerous attempts created memorable moments. The unpredictability made every catch attempt tense. The secret techniques, cut, surf, strength, flash, served as ability gates blocking areas until players earned specific badges. This Metroidvania-style progression encouraged backtracking to explore previously inaccessible areas. Finding a new area after obtaining Surf felt rewarding. These techniques tied progression to exploration in satisfying ways. Day and night cycles didn't exist in Red and Blue, being added only in later generations. But time still mattered through the Game Boy's internal clock affecting certain events. The simplicity of Red and Blue's time system kept focus on core gameplay rather than complex temporal mechanics. Gender differences among Pokemon didn't exist in Red and Blue, with all Pokemon being treated as genderless or having unspecified gender. Breeding wasn't possible. These features were added in later generations. The original games kept mechanics relatively simple, which helped accessibility for younger players while still providing depth for those who sought it. The post-game content in Red and Blue was limited compared to later Pokemon games. After defeating the Elite Four, players could catch legendary birds, explore Cerulean Cave to find Mewtwo, and complete the Pokédex. This was less content than later titles, but substantial for 1996 standards. Mewtwo served as a final challenge, a level 70 psychic type requiring strategy to capture. Glitches were numerous in the original Red and Blue. Missing No, a glitch Pokemon, became famous among players. The glitch could duplicate items, including rare candies and Master Balls. While unintended, Missing No became part of Pokemon culture. Players shared methods to encounter it, adding an element of secret knowledge as to the experience. Nintendo never patched these glitches in the original releases. The programming in Red and Blue was somewhat messy, a result of the extended development time and small team. Code was occasionally inefficient. Data was sometimes stored in odd ways. But the games worked, and that was what mattered. The technical imperfections didn't prevent millions of players from enjoying the experience. Sometimes finished is better than perfect. Competitive Pokemon battling emerged from Red and Blue, despite the games not being designed specifically for competition. Players discovered optimal strategies, popular team compositions, and powerful move combinations. Tauros, Snorlax, Chansey, Alakazam, and Exeggutor dominated the metagame. Psychic types were overpowered due to a bug that made them immune to ghost-type moves. These balance issues would be addressed in future generations. The Link Cable battles added replayability far beyond the single-player campaign. Battling friends provided unpredictable challenges different from AI opponents. Each battle was unique because human players were less predictable than programmed trainers. This social element extended the game's lifespan indefinitely. As long as you had someone to battle, Pokemon offered new experiences. Trading completed the social loop. Finding someone with the Pokemon you needed created genuine joy. The act of physically connecting Game Boys with a cable and watching Pokemon transfer made trading feel tangible. Receiving a rare Pokemon from a friend could cement a memory for years. These social interactions gave Pokemon emotional resonance beyond its mechanical systems. The decision to make certain Pokemon version exclusive was controversial but effective. It forced players to interact with others who made different purchase decisions. This could be frustrating for players without trading partners. But for most players, it enhanced the experience by making friends valuable resources and encouraging community building. Regional variations in Pokemon availability added strategic considerations. Some Pokemon appeared only in specific routes or caves. Some were extremely rare, even in their designated locations. Chansey in the Safari Zone was notoriously difficult to encounter. These rarity variations made certain Pokemon feel special when finally obtained. The Safari Zone introduced different catching mechanics. Players had limited time and could only use Safari Balls. Pokemon might flee at any moment. Bait and Soot. Rocks affected behavior, but not in entirely predictable ways. This minigame tested patience and luck. Catching Tauros, Scyther, or Pinsir in the Safari Zone required persistence. The Game Corner offered another diversion. Playing slots allowed players to earn coins exchangeable for rare Pokemon like Porygon or powerful TMs. Some players spent hours at the Game Corner accumulating coins. Others found it tedious. The inclusion of gambling mechanics in a children's game would later receive criticism, leading to changes in future titles. Fishing introduced tiered progression through different rods. The old rod caught only weak Pokemon like Magikarp. The good rod offered better options. The super rod allowed access to the strongest water Pokemon. This progression within a single mechanic mirrored the game's overall structure of gradual improvement and increasing access. Pokemon cries were synthesized sounds meant to evoke each creature's personality. Pikachu said something resembling Pika. Charmander had a reptilian growl. Jigglypuff made musical sounds. These cries, while simple, gave personality to creatures that otherwise appeared only as sprites. Players could recognize Pokemon by sound alone. The opening sequence with Gengar and Nidorino battling immediately established tone. It showed that Pokemon was about battling creatures, but in a fantastical context. The contrast between Professor Oak's calm introduction and the intense battle opening created expectations for the game's mix of peaceful exploration and exciting combat. Starter Pokemon choice became intensely personal for players. Bulbasaur, Charmander, or Squirtle each had advantages and disadvantages. Bulbasaur was easiest for early gyms. Charmander was hardest early but became powerful. Squirtle was balanced. Players debated these choices endlessly. The decision felt meaningful because you lived with it throughout the game. The rival choosing the Pokémon strong against yours created an immediate challenge. If you picked Charmander, your rival picked Squirtle, making early battles difficult. This forced players to catch and train additional Pokémon rather than relying solely on their starter. It was elegant difficulty scaling through narrative context. Pokémon centers provided free healing, a generous design decision that prevented frustration from punishing death loops. Returning to a Pokémon center was never more than a few minutes away in most areas. This accessibility kept the game flowing without excessive friction from resource management. Pokémarts sold items with escalating costs and power. Early game, you bought potions. Later, super potions, hyper potions, full restores. This progression gave a sense of economic advancement. Managing money to afford better items added light resource management without becoming burdensome. Hidden items rewarded exploration. Pressing A against random tiles or rocks sometimes revealed items. Full restores, hidden in obscure corners. Rare candies tucked away. These discoveries gave players reasons to thoroughly explore every area rather than rushing through routes. The rewards made exploration feel worthwhile. Caves required navigation through dark or maze-like areas. Rock Tunnel, dark unless you used flash, frustrated some players, but created memorable challenge. Mant Moon introduced the dungeon exploration format. Victory Road served as a final test of navigation and battling skills before the Elite Four. These dungeons broke up the pattern of routes and towns. Water routes allowed exploration via surfing, opening new areas after obtaining the HM. Cinnabar Island was accessible only by surf, making it feel isolated and special. The Seafoam Islands contained Articuno, rewarding players who explored off the main path. Water routes added geographical variety to Kanto. Legendary Pokémon, Articuno, Zapdos, Moltres, and Mewtwo, provided post-game goals. Each required effort to reach and were powerful enough to feel special. Catching all four felt like completing a collection. Their rarity and strength made them aspirational without being necessary for beating the game. The bicycle provided faster travel, reducing tedium when backtracking. Obtaining it required a special voucher from the Pokémon Fan Club chairman, adding a small quest element. The bicycle made exploration more enjoyable by reducing time spent traversing familiar routes. Teaching machines, TMs and HMs, allowed move customization. TMs were single-use, creating strategic decisions about which Pokémon should learn powerful moves like Earthquake or Psychic. HMs were permanent, but often required for progression, meaning they often occupied move slots you'd rather use for battle moves. This tension created interesting team-building challenges. Stat-boosting items like protein, iron, and calcium allowed min-maxing for players who understood the underlying mechanics. Most casual players ignored these items or used them without deep strategy. But knowledgeable players could create optimized Pokémon through careful stat enhancement, adding a layer for hardcore players. The Fame Checker and other features from later games weren't present in Red and Blue. The original games were relatively streamlined, focusing on core mechanics rather than peripheral systems. This simplicity was both strength and limitation. It made the games accessible, but left some players wanting more depth. Pokémon's art style was distinctive, even in early form. Ken Sugimori's illustrations had a specific character. Some Pokémon were cute, others cool, some bizarre. This variety ensured different players could find favorites. The art style was inviting without being overly childish, appealing to a broad age range. The balance between collection and battling was carefully maintained. You couldn't catch all Pokémon by focusing only on combat. You couldn't complete the Pokédex without engaging with the battle system to progress. The two primary mechanics supported each other, creating a cohesive experience greater than either element alone. Environmental storytelling was minimal but present. Lavender Town's Pokémon Tower suggested a world where Pokémon die. Team Rocket's takeover of Silph showed corporate villainy. These narrative elements added weight without requiring complex storytelling mechanics. The anime's influence on later Pokémon games was significant, but Red and Blue existed before that cross-pollination. The games were pure game design, uninfluenced by media adaptation demands. This purity gave them focused direction, though it also meant missing opportunities for multimedia synergy from the start. Pokémon Yellow, released later, incorporated anime elements like Pikachu as your starter and Jessie and James appearing. But Red and Blue remained separate from that influence, a snapshot of Pokémon as purely a game concept before it became a multimedia empire. The save system allowed one save file per cartridge. This meant siblings sharing a Game Boy often had conflicts over who got to play their save file. It also meant completing the Pokédex truly required trading with others rather than using multiple save files. The limitation enhanced the social aspect, even if frustrating for some players. Random encounters in grass and caves were common enough to feel constant, but not so frequent as to become unbearable. The encounter rate balance wasn't perfect. Some areas, like Zubat Caves, felt excessive, but generally, the pacing between exploration and battles worked well enough to maintain flow. Repels allowed players to avoid weak Pokémon encounters, useful when traversing areas below your team's level. This quality of life feature prevented tedium without eliminating challenge. Managing repel inventory became part of resource planning for long expeditions. The level curve generally matched story progression. Pokémon you caught early would be appropriately leveled for early challenges. As you progressed, you caught stronger Pokémon or trained existing ones to higher levels. Some grinding was necessary, but not excessively so. The curve wasn't perfect. Some difficulty spikes existed, but it was generally reasonable. Experience scaling meant lower-level Pokémon gained experience faster, helping newly caught Pokémon reach parity with your main team. This allowed flexibility in team composition without requiring excessive grinding. You could rotate Pokémon in and out of your active team somewhat freely. The Pokémon storage system allowed you to maintain a collection beyond your 6 Pokémon party. Boxes could store additional Pokémon, essential for players aiming to catch all 151. The system was clunky by modern standards, but functional enough to serve its purpose. Item Finder allowed detection of hidden items, making thorough exploration more feasible. Without it, finding every hidden item required checking every tile, an unreasonable time investment. The Item Finder reduced frustration while maintaining some exploration challenge. The V's Seeker and similar features from later games didn't exist in Red and Blue. Rematching trainers wasn't possible. Once you beat a trainer, they never battled you again. This made money finite and required more careful resource management than later games with infinite grinding potential. Trade evolutions, Pokémon like Machamp, Golem, Gengar, and the Alakazam that only evolved when traded, added another social element. You couldn't complete evolutions alone. This encouraged community building, but frustrated players without trading partners. It was a bold design decision, prioritizing social play over solitary accessibility. The link cable itself became iconic. Connecting 2 Game Boys with that gray cable was a tactile, physical experience. You had to sit close together. You watched Pokemon transfer on both screens simultaneously. This physical connection made the social interaction more tangible than modern wireless trading. Version-exclusive Pokemon created specific pairing value. If you had red, you needed someone with blue to get certain Pokemon. If you had blue, you needed red for others. This encouraged diverse social groups where different people owned different versions, maximizing trading potential. The mystery gift feature from later games wasn't in red and blue. Special event distributions were handled through mail order promotions or special tournaments. This made rare Pokemon genuinely rare, not just uncommon. Owning Mew or other event Pokemon conveyed special status. Pokemon breeding didn't exist in the first generation. All Pokemon were caught in the wild or received as gifts. Eggs and baby Pokemon would come in later generations. This simplified the systems, but limited team-building options. You couldn't customize Pokemon through selective breeding. Individual values and effort values existed in red and blue, but were called different things and worked differently than in later games. These hidden stats created variation between the individual Pokemon of the same species. Two Pikachu could have different stats even at the same level, adding another layer of depth for players who understood the systems. The Battle Tower and other competitive facilities didn't exist in red and blue. Competitive play happened exclusively through link cable battles between friends or organized tournaments. This grassroots competitive scene emerged organically without official support, demonstrating the depth players found in the battle system. Natures, a feature defining stat growth in later games, didn't exist in red and blue. Pokemon stats were determined by species, level, IVs, and EVs alone. This simplified team building while reducing strategic depth. Later games would add complexity through natures and abilities. Shiny Pokemon didn't exist in red and blue, being introduced in gold and silver. Every Pokemon looked the same, regardless of individual variation. The rarity of shinies in later games created another collecting goal, but red and blue focused purely on species collection. Following Pokemon, having your Pokemon walk behind you wasn't a feature until much later. In red and blue, your Pokemon existed only in menus, battles, and your imagination. This abstraction allowed players to envision their Pokemon however they wanted when not in battle. The Pokédex descriptions added personality and lore to each creature. Some were realistic, describing habitats and behaviors. Others were fantastical, describing impossible abilities. These descriptions fired imagination, giving players reasons to care about Pokemon beyond their battle utility. Environmental effects like weather didn't exist in battles. Rain, sandstorms, hail, these mechanics came later. Red and blue battles were simpler, focused on types, stats, and moves without additional environmental factors. This made battles more straightforward, but less strategically deep. Held items didn't exist in red and blue. Pokemon couldn't hold berries, choice bands, or other items affecting performance. This feature came in gold and silver. Red and Blue's battle system was purer in some ways, but less complex strategically. The bag organization was relatively simple compared to later games. Items were in one big list rather than sorted into categories. This became unwieldy as you accumulated items, but given the Game Boy's interface limitations, sophisticated organization would have been difficult to implement. Running shoes didn't exist. Your character walked at one speed, unless on a bicycle. This made traversal slower than in later games, but players in 1998 had no frame of reference for faster movement speeds. The limitation was accepted as normal. Pokemon abilities, Passive traits like levitate or intimidate didn't exist in red and blue. These were added in ruby and sapphire. Their absence simplified battles but reduced strategic diversity. Each Pokemon species had less unique identity without abilities differentiating them beyond stats and moves. Double battles, where each trainer uses two Pokemon simultaneously, weren't possible in red and blue. All battles were one-on-one. This simplified the strategic space, but reduced tactical options. Later games would expand into double battles, triple battles, and rotation battles. Following the Elite Four championship, the game effectively ended. There was no battle frontier, no additional story chapters, no legendary Pokemon hunt beyond the four main legendaries. Completing the Pokédex was the main post-game goal. For some players, this was sufficient. Others wished for more content. The World Championships and official competitive Pokemon scene didn't exist during Red and Blue's peak. Competitive play was informal, organized by players themselves. This gave the competitive community a grassroots authenticity, but also meant less infrastructure for serious players. Online trading and battling were impossible with Game Boy technology. All social interaction required physical proximity. This created stronger local communities, but excluded players in isolated areas. The physical requirement for trading made completing the Pokédex more challenging for some players. Pokemon representation across types was unbalanced. Psychic types dominated competitive play. Dragon types were nearly non-existent, with the Dratini line being the only Dragon-type family. Some types, like Ghost, had very few representatives. Later generations would address these imbalances. The move pool for each Pokemon was limited compared to later games. Some Pokemon could learn only a handful of moves by leveling up. TMs and HMs provided additional options, but move diversity was less than in subsequent generations. This limited strategic options, but simplified decision-making. This physical and special split hadn't occurred yet. In red and blue, whether a move was physical or special was determined by its type, not the individual move. All fire moves were special. All fighting moves were physical. This created odd situations where Pokemon with high attack stats couldn't effectively use physical moves of certain types. Mega Evolution, Z moves, Dynamax, Terastallization, all these battle mechanics from later generations obviously didn't exist in red and blue. The original battle system was straightforward. Choose one of four moves, hope it works, repeat. This simplicity was accessible, but provided less tactical depth than modern games. The champion being your rival rather than an established character was narratively satisfying. You raced against him throughout the game. His final appearance as champion before you could claim the title created a perfect climax. Defeating him meant surpassing your closest competition, making victory personally meaningful. Professor Oak's role as both mentor and grandfather to your rival added narrative weight to the story. He was involved but distant, giving you freedom while providing occasional guidance. His dream of completing the Pokédex became your quest, creating purpose beyond simply battling. The Sylph Kobu storyline, where Team Rocket takes over the building, provided a memorable dungeon experience. Navigating the multi-floor building, using warp panels to solve spatial puzzles, battling numerous Rocket members, this sequence broke from the gym progression formula and provided variety. Giovanni's dual role as Team Rocket boss and Viridian City gym leader created a narrative twist. Players might figure it out before the reveal, but the connection between the criminal organization and the final gym was clever storytelling within the game's simple narrative framework. The Pokemon Mansion on Cinnabar Island contained diary entries revealing Mewtwo's creation, adding dark undertones to the world. These optional lore pieces rewarded exploration and hinted at more complex world building than the main story revealed. Players could ignore them or dive deep into speculation. The ghost Pokémon in Lavender Tower added a horror element unusual for a game aimed at children. The ghost Marowak couldn't be caught or fought without the Sylph scope. Its tragic backstory, killed protecting its child, added emotional depth. Lavender Town's eerie music enhanced the atmosphere. Pokémon sleeping, being poisoned outside of battle, fainting from poison. These states created consequences beyond individual battles. Poisoned Pokémon took damage while walking, requiring attention to party health. Fainted Pokémon stayed fainted until healed. These systems made the world feel more persistent. Cut, while necessary for progression, was largely useless in battle. This created a dilemma. Teach it to a main team member and waste a move slot, or keep an HM user specifically for utility. Later, games would improve HM systems, but in Red and Blue, this frustration was part of the experience. Strength was more useful in battle than Cut, but still often relegated to a utility Pokémon. The need to teach multiple HMs meant many players kept a HM slave Pokémon whose only purpose was knowing field moves. This wasn't elegant design, but was functional. Surf was both useful in battle and necessary for exploration, making it a rare HM that didn't feel wasteful. Many strong water types could learn Surf, making it easy to integrate into battle teams. This made Surf the best designed HM in Red and Blue. Flash had low accuracy and was often skipped. Players could navigate Rock Tunnel without it, though with difficulty. Its optional nature meant players could choose between ease or challenge, a nice bit of player agency. The bicycle road provided a unique route type, requiring a bicycle to traverse. This variation in route design prevented Kanto from feeling monotonous. Each area had distinguishing characteristics, whether through required items, Pokémon availability, or aesthetic design. The Indigo Plateau represented the final destination, the culmination of your journey. Reaching it felt like an achievement, even before facing the Elite Four. The location's isolated, mountaintop positioning reinforced the sense that you had reached the pinnacle of the Pokémon world. The credits sequence after becoming champion scrolled through Pokémon you caught, celebrating your collection. This personalized ending acknowledged your specific journey, showing that even two players who both beat the game had unique experiences based on which Pokémon they caught. Replaying Red and Blue offers a different experience than playing modern Pokémon games. The slower pace, simpler graphics, and less complex systems create a more contemplative experience. There's less to optimize, fewer systems to master, more room for imagination to fill in gaps. The limitations forced creativity from both developers and players. Developers had to achieve their vision within severe constraints. Players had to use imagination to envision their Pokémon's personalities and adventures beyond what the game explicitly showed. These limitations became strengths, engaging players' creativity. Nostalgia colors perception of Red and Blue for many players. Those who played them in childhood remember the sense of wonder, the schoolyard trading, the feeling of discovering something genuinely new. Objective analysis might find flaws, but emotional connection to formative gaming experiences transcends objective critique. For players who never experienced Red and Blue in their original context, the games might seem primitive. Modern Pokémon games have refined every system. Quality of life improvements abound, but Red and Blue contain the pure essence of Pokémon before decades of refinement and feature creep. They represent the franchise in its most distilled form that persists. Cultural impact extended beyond gaming. Pokémon entered mainstream consciousness. parents who knew nothing about video games knew what Pokémon was. The franchise influenced fashion, language, social behaviors. Gotta catch 'em all became a widely recognized phrase even among non-gamers. Schools banning Pokémon cards demonstrated the phenomenon's reach. When educational institutions felt compelled to address a children's game, that game had clearly transcended typical entertainment. The bans, intended to reduce distraction, often increased interest through forbidden fruit appeal. The merchandising empire built on Pokemon's back generated billions. Plush toys, action figures, clothing, accessories, home goods, every imaginable product category received Pokemon variants. The characters designed for a Game Boy game became a licensing juggernaut rivaling Disney properties. The competitive community that emerged from Red and Blue's battle system wasn't anticipated by developers. They created depth without fully realizing its competitive potential. Players discovered optimal strategies, created tier lists, developed metagames. This emergent complexity from relatively simple systems demonstrated elegant game design. The trading card game based on Pokémon became a major success independent of the video games. The cards translated Pokémon battling into a different format, creating a parallel competitive scene. The synergy between video games and cards amplified both, each driving interest in the other. The animated series expanded Pokémon's world beyond what the games could depict. Seeing Pokémon move and act brought them to life in ways sprites never could. The anime introduced millions to Pokémon before they played the games, creating familiarity that eased game entry. The movies, starting with Pokémon, the first movie, brought Pokémon to theater screens. These films were financially successful and further cemented Pokémon's cultural presence. The first movie's themes of identity and nature versus nurture added philosophical depth to what some dismissed as a children's franchise. Spin-off games like Pokémon Snap, Pokémon Stadium, and Pokémon Puzzle League expanded the franchise into different genres. Not all were developed by Game Freak, but all contributed to Pokémon's dominance in late 90s and early 2000s gaming culture. The impact on Game Freak as a company was transformative. They went from a struggling studio on the brink of closure to one of the most important developers in gaming. The financial success ensured their survival and enabled future projects. Pokémon's success gave them security and influence. For Nintendo, Pokémon revitalized the Game Boy at a time when the system was aging. Sales surged. The Game Boy Color was released partially to support Pokémon's continued success. Pokémon became one of Nintendo's most valuable properties, eventually rivaling Mario in importance. Satoshi Tajiri achieved his vision of creating a world where children could experience the joy of catching and collecting creatures. His childhood passion for insect collecting, transformed through video games, touched millions of children who never caught a real beetle. The digital recreation of natural exploration resonated across cultures. Ken Sugimori's art direction defined Pokémon's visual identity. His designs balanced accessibility with creativity, creating characters that appealed to diverse audiences. The consistency of his style across 151 creatures helped maintain Pokémon's cohesive aesthetic, even with huge variety. Junichi Masuda's music became inseparable from Pokémon's identity. The melodies are instantly recognizable decades later. His compositions elevated simple gameplay moments into emotional experiences. The opening theme, battle music, and town themes formed a soundscape that enhanced every aspect of gameplay. The team's perseverance through 6 years of development, financial hardship, and technical challenges created something special. Had they given up, as would have been understandable, one of the most successful franchises in entertainment history wouldn't exist. Their persistence changed gaming and popular culture. Red and Blue weren't perfect games by objective standards. The programming was sometimes messy. Balance issues plagued competitive play. Graphics were primitive, even by 1996 standards. The games had numerous glitches. But perfection wasn't necessary for success. The core concept was strong enough to overcome imperfections. The games succeeded because they fulfilled a fantasy many people shared, exploring a world full of mysterious creatures, collecting and training them, battling friends, becoming a champion. This fantasy resonated across age groups and cultures. The execution was good enough to deliver that fantasy in engaging ways. Looking at Pokémon Red and Blue's legacy, their influence on gaming is undeniable. They popularized the creature collecting genre. They proved handheld RPGs could achieve massive success. They demonstrated the power of social gaming mechanics. They showed that Japanese games could dominate Western markets. Subsequent Pokémon generations built on Red and Blue's foundation, adding features and refining systems. Gold and Silver added breeding, held items, and more complex battling. Ruby and Sapphire added abilities and double battles. Each generation expanded the formula while maintaining core elements established in Red and Blue. But no later Pokémon game recaptured the pure magic of discovering Zokisan for the first time. The sense of wonder when you first encountered Pikachu in Viridian Forest. The excitement of catching your first legendary. The satisfaction of finally defeating the Elite Four. These first-time experiences defined a generation of gamers. For many millennials, Pokémon Red and Blue were formative gaming experiences. They were entry points into RPGs, into handheld gaming, into gaming culture itself. The game's accessibility welcomed new players while providing enough depth to satisfy experienced gamers. This broad appeal contributed to unprecedented success. The game's timing was fortunate. Released as the internet was growing, but before social media dominated, Pokémon spread through word of mouth and playground conversations. The physical social interaction required for trading fit perfectly into that transitional technological moment. Had Pokémon released 5 years earlier, the technology wouldn't have supported the vision. The original Game Boy, though used for Red and Blue, was showing age by 1996. Had they released 5 years later, the gaming landscape would have been different, potentially less receptive to pixel art handheld RPGs. The success validated Satoshi's vision and Game Freak's efforts. It proved that innovative gameplay and strong concepts could succeed despite technical limitations. It showed that social features could drive game sales in unprecedented ways. It demonstrated that taking risks on unusual ideas could yield enormous rewards. Red and Blue's influence extended beyond direct imitations. Many games incorporated collecting mechanics inspired by Pokémon. The social trading concept appeared in various forms across gaming. The idea of version-exclusive content to encourage trading influenced other titles. Pokémon's fingerprints appear throughout gaming history. For newer players discovering Red and Blue through Virtual Console or emulation, the games offer a window into gaming history. They show what captivated a generation with simpler graphics and systems than modern games offer. They demonstrate that great game design transcends technical limitations. The original 151 Pokémon remain beloved despite hundreds of new Pokémon being created in subsequent generations. Charizard, Mewtwo, Pikachu, Blastoise, Gengar, these designs have enduring appeal. They were created without benefit of decades of design experience, but remain iconic. The Kanto region is revisited in later games, remade with modern graphics and systems. These remakes introduce new generations to locations first created for Red and Blue. The enduring appeal of Kanto demonstrates the strength of the original world design despite its technical primitiveness. Speedrunning communities have extensively analyzed Red and Blue, discovering glitches and exploits, allowing completion in minutes rather than hours. These technical deep dives reveal the game's underlying complexity and quirks. Speedruns of Red and Blue remain popular, showing continued interest decades after release. Randomizers and ROM hacks created by fans extend Red and Blue's life. These modifications change Pokémon locations, types, and movesets, creating fresh experiences from familiar frameworks. The active modding community demonstrates passionate fan fans, engagement persisting years after the game's release. Competitive Pokémon evolved far beyond what Red and Blue's developers envisioned. The Pokémon World Championships draw players from across the globe, competing for substantial prizes. The games that Nintendo barely understood when greenlighting became a serious esport with professional players and strategic depth. The anime continues into its 25th year, an extraordinary run for any television series. The longevity demonstrates Pokémon's sustained cultural relevance. While the anime has evolved, its core, a young trainer traveling and collecting Pokémon, remains true to Red and Blue's vision. The Pokémon trading card game competitive scene thrives with tournaments, professional players, and significant prizes. The cards that started as merchandise became their own legitimate competitive enterprise, parallel to video game competitions. Mobile games like Pokémon Go brought the franchise to smartphones, introducing Pokémon to new audiences who never played traditional video games. Go's augmented reality mechanics echo Satoshi's original vision of experiencing Pokémon in the real world, bringing the concept full circle. The movies continue with new theatrical releases introducing new Pokémon and stories while respecting the foundations established by Red and Blue. The film series has evolved stylistically but maintains connection to original concepts. Merchandise continues generating billions annually. Pokémon plush toys, clothing, accessories, and countless other products fill stores worldwide. The merchandising success that began with Red and Blue's popularity shows no signs of slowing. For Game Freak, Pokémon's success brought challenges alongside rewards. Being known primarily for one franchise can be limiting. They've developed other games, but none approached Pokémon's success. The blessing of creating something beloved became the challenge of being defined by that creation, the puissance. Pressure of Pokémon's success affects every subsequent game. Each new generation is compared to predecessors, especially to the original Red and Blue. Innovations are scrutinized, removed features are criticized. The passionate fan base's expectations can be difficult to satisfy. Despite pressures, Game Freak continues producing Pokémon games for new Nintendo systems. The franchise adapts to new hardware while maintaining core elements. The balance between innovation and tradition reflects the lessons learned from Red and Blue's development and success. Looking back at Red and Blue, with perspective of nearly 3 decades, reveals both strengths and weaknesses. The games were revolutionary in some ways, conventional in others. They succeeded through combination of good timing, innovative social features, appealing concept, and passionate development team. The glitches that plagued Red and Blue, from missing No to the countless battle and overworld bugs, are now part of the game's charm. What might have been viewed as unprofessional in another context became quirky character in Pokémon. Players shared glitch knowledge like secrets, adding mystery to the experience. The fact that Red and Blue were almost canceled multiple times during development makes their success even more remarkable. The near loss of all data could have ended the project. Financial difficulties nearly shut down Game Freak. Nintendo's lukewarm support almost prevented the games from being made. Each obstacle was overcome through determination. The decision to include Mew, programmed into the games at the last moment by one developer, accidentally created one of gaming's most famous secrets. Mew wasn't supposed to be accessible to players. The discovery of glitches to encounter it added mystery. The official Mew distributions created events that built community. The cultural differences between Japan and Western markets could have derailed international success. Pokémon was very Japanese in design and concept. Localization teams worked to make it accessible without losing essential character. The balance they achieved allowed Pokémon to feel both universal and distinctly Japanese. The anime's role in Western success cannot be overstated. Introducing Americans to Pokémon through television before game release built awareness and excitement. Children wanted to experience the world they saw on TV. The synergy between media forms amplified both. The controversy over seizures caused by an anime episode temporarily threatened Pokémon's reputation. The incident led to changes in how animation handles flashing effects. That Pokémon survived this controversy demonstrated the franchise's resilience and value to stakeholders. The playground culture surrounding Pokémon, trading cards, sharing tips, battling Game Boys during recess, created social phenomena schools struggled to manage. Banning Pokémon often backfired, increasing its appeal. The games became more than entertainment. They were social currency among children. Adults initially dismissive of Pokémon as a fad were proven wrong by sustained success. The franchise outlasted countless competitors and imitators. What seemed like momentary phenomenon proved to have lasting appeal across generations. The competitive community's discovery of complex strategies within Red and Blue's battle system revealed depth the developers hadn't fully appreciated. Players found optimal movesets, calculated damage ranges, developed metagames. The emergent complexity justified Pokémon's competitive scene. The physical link cable as requirement for social features seems quaint in retrospect. Modern games enable global trading and battling through internet connectivity, but the link cable's requirement for physical proximity created different social dynamics, arguably more meaningful interactions than anonymous online play. Completing the Pokédex in Red and Blue required dedication and social connections. Without internet trading, finding someone with needed Pokémon took effort. The achievement meant something because it required both gameplay skill and social networking. Modern conveniences have made completion easier, but perhaps is less meaningful. The game's save file limitations meant players couldn't experiment with multiple teams or playstyles without deleting progress. This created a commitment to chosen path. Each decision carried more weight because you lived with consequences. Modern games' multiple save files reduce this commitment, but increase freedom. The tutorial sections were minimal compared to modern games. Professor Oak gave brief explanation, then players were set loose. Learning happened through experimentation and exploration. This respected players' intelligence, but could confuse those unfamiliar with RPG conventions. The difficulty curve wasn't perfectly balanced. Some gym leaders were pushovers, others difficulty spikes. The Elite Four represented significant challenge jump. These imperfections weren't necessarily flaws. They created memorable moments and required players to adapt strategies. The post-game content was modest by modern standards. No battle frontier, no extensive legendary quests, no significant story continuation. Catching Mewtwo and completing the Pokédex comprised most post-game goals. Later games would expand post-game dramatically, but Red and Blue's simplicity had its own appeal. The glitch Pokémon, like Missing No, became part of Pokémon culture despite being unintentional. Players shared methods to encounter them, traded stories about weird experiences. These glitches added mystery and danger to the game world, creating urban legends among players. The battle animations, while simple, conveyed the impact effectively. Screen shakes, flashes, and basic movements sold the power of attacks despite technical limitations. Sound effects complemented visuals to create satisfying combat feedback. The Pokémon designs ranged from simple to complex. Some, like Voltorb, were just Pokeballs with faces. Others, like Gyarados, had the generous details. This variety allowed different designs to appeal to different players. Some preferred simple, cute Pokémon. Others liked complex, cool ones. The type chart creating rock, paper, scissors relationships established strategic foundation. Water beats fire, fire beats grass, grass beats water formed intuitive core. Additional types added complexity while maintaining logical relationships. Learning type advantages became essential knowledge for serious players. The move types not always matching Pokémon types created strategic depth. Pikachu could learn Iron Tail to fight rock types. Charizard could learn Solar Beam for water types. Coverage moves allowed countering Pokémon that would otherwise threaten your team. The stat system with HP, attack, defense, special, and speed provided enough complexity for strategy without overwhelming casual players. Understanding stat relationships helped optimize teams, but wasn't necessary for completing the game. This accessibility for casual players while rewarding hardcore players was excellent design. The wild Pokémon encounter system created tension between wanting to avoid battles to preserve resources and wanting to catch new Pokémon. This push-pull dynamic kept exploration engaging. Every grass patch held potential discovery or unwanted delay. The variety of environments, forests, caves, cities, water routes, buildings, prevented monotony despite limited graphical capabilities. Each area felt distinct through clever use of tiles, wild Pokémon, and music. World design compensated for technical limitations. The NPC trainers with themed teams taught players about type advantages and team building. The bug catcher with all bug types, the youngster with normal types, the beauty with poison types. These patterns helped players understand type concepts through gameplay rather than explicit tutorial. The gym leader battles, with their type themes and escalating difficulty, created clear progression milestones. Defeating each gym leader felt like meaningful achievement. The badges displayed progression visually, providing constant reminder of accomplishments. The rival battles served as difficulty checks, ensuring players weren't underleveled for upcoming challenges. His team improved parallel to expected player progression, scaling difficulty appropriately. The personal narrative framing made these battles more engaging than generic trainer fights. The legendary Pokémon being level 50 when encountered provided appropriate challenge for endgame content. They weren't impossibly strong, but required strategy to catch. The satisfaction of finally catching Articuno, Zapdos, Moltres, or Mewtwo rewarded persistence. The starter Pokémon evolutionary lines being well balanced ensured no choice was wrong. Venusaur, Charizard, and Blastoise were all viable for beating the game. This allowed players to choose based on preference rather than optimization, respecting player agency. The EV evolutionary branches introduced decision-making beyond simply leveling up. Choosing whether to evolve Eevee into Vaporeon, Jolteon, or Flareon based on team needs added strategic planning element. The choice being permanent created weight to decision. The Game Corner, providing access to rare Pokémon like Porygon, created alternative acquisition paths. Players could grind coins or use money to purchase them. This flexibility allowed different playstyles to achieve same goals. The daycare system in Red and Blue was simple. Leave a Pokémon, it gained levels while you walked. This was less complex than breeding introduced in later games, but provided passive leveling option for players willing to use it. The Fame Checker and Pokémon following mechanics from later games weren't in Red and Blue. The original games were streamlined, focusing on core, collection, and battling without peripheral features. This focus prevented feature creep while potentially limiting variety. The graphical style, while primitive by modern standards, had distinct aesthetic. The limited palette created cohesive visual identity. The sprite work efficiently conveyed an information despite resolution limitations. Art direction compensated for technical constraints. The text-based storytelling used a simple language, appropriate for young players, while still telling a coherent story. Dialogue was brief, avoiding walls of text that would bore target audience. The writing respected players' time and intelligence. The world felt large, despite being relatively small by modern RPG standards. Clever design created sense of expansive world within Game Boy's limitations. Kanto felt like complete region worth exploring thoroughly. The mystery elements. What is Team Rocket planning? What happened to Mr. Fuji? What is Mewtwo? Added narrative hooks beyond simply collecting Pokémon. These questions motivated exploration and gave context to gameplay. The emotional moments, though simple, were effective. Seeing your rival mourn his Raticate, freeing Mr. Fuji from Team Rocket. These small narrative beats added weight to otherwise straightforward adventure. The integration of game mechanics into world design was elegant. HMs served both gameplay and narrative purposes. Needing Surf to reach Cinnabar Island made sense geographically. Strength for Victory Road established it as final challenge. The world felt cohesive. The lack of voice acting allowed players to imagine character voices. This engagement of imagination enhanced personal connection to characters and Pokémon. Modern, fully voiced games remove this participatory element for better and worse. The simple graphics paradoxically enhanced rather than limited the experience. Players' imaginations filled in details sprites couldn't show. Pokémon became whatever players envisioned, more vivid in imagination than any graphics could render. The community that formed around Red and Blue created shared experience across millions. Schoolyard conversations, strategy guides, fan sites, fan art. The community engagement amplified the games beyond what developers created. Players became co-creators of Pokémon culture. The merchandise extending from games created feedback loop. Buying Pokémon toys reinforced game engagement. Playing games motivated merchandise purchases. This synergy built empire worth billions annually. The long-term impact on gaming industry included popularizing creature collecting genre, validating handheld RPGs, proving social features could drive sales, and demonstrating Japanese games' global potential. Red and Blue changed gaming in fundamental ways. For individual players, the impact varied. Some found lifelong hobby, others brief childhood entertainment. Some became competitive players, others casual collectors. The games accommodated different engagement levels, contributing to broad appeal. The nostalgia surrounding Red and Blue creates complicated relationship with the games. They represent childhood for many now adults. Objective critique is difficult when memories are colored by formative experiences. The games were important not just for what they were, but for when they appeared in players' lives. Looking forward, Pokémon's future seems secure. New generations continue releasing. The franchise adapts to new technologies and markets. Red and Blue's legacy persists in every Pokémon game's DNA, the foundation all subsequent titles build upon. The core appeal, catching and training creatures, exploring worlds, battling friends, remains relevant decades later. The specific implementation evolves, but the fundamental fantasy endures. This consistency explains Pokemon's longevity. The lessons from Red and Blue's development, perseverance through hardship, innovation within constraints, community-focused, design, respecting player agency, remain valuable for game developers today. The games demonstrated that technical limitations needn't prevent success if core ideas are strong. The social elements that made Red and Blue special, trading, battling friends, sharing discoveries, highlight gaming's capacity for bringing people together. In an era of online gaming, the physical connections Red and Blue required seem quaint, but were arguably more meaningful. The underdog story of Game Freak's near failure and ultimate success inspires creative professionals facing seemingly impossible challenges. The games that almost didn't exist became one of the most successful franchises ever. Persistence through adversity can yield extraordinary results. The childhood wonder that inspired Satoshi's vision, catching beetles beneath stones, exploring forests, discovering nature's mysteries, found new form in digital world. His desire to share that wonder with children who couldn't access natural exploration succeeded beyond imagination. Millions experienced that joy through Pokémon. The collaboration between Satoshi's vision, Ken's art, Junichi's music, and the entire team's dedication created something greater than sum of parts. The synergy of talents and passions produced work that resonated globally across cultures and generations. The risk Nintendo took on unusual concept paid off tremendously. Their willingness to support Satoshi's vision, despite not fully understanding it, enabled one of their most valuable properties. Sometimes success requires faith in creators even when the concept seems strange. The technical achievements, fitting 151 Pokémon onto Game Boy cartridge, implementing stable trading through link cable, creating engaging battle system within severe constraints, deserve recognition. The team solved seemingly impossible technical challenges through creativity and determination. The game design elegance, type advantages creating strategic depth, version exclusives encouraging trading, evolutionary lines providing progression, Pokédex completion, motivating exploration, demonstrated sophisticated understanding of players' psychology and motivation. The systems worked together harmoniously to create cohesive experience. The world building, though simple, established foundation for decades of expansion. Kanto introduced concepts and locations that would be referenced and revisited in numerous sequels and spin-offs. The original region maintains importance in franchise lore. The characters, though simply drawn, became iconic. Red, Blue, Professor Oak, Team Rocket, gym leaders. These characters appeared in subsequent games, anime, and other media. Simple designs proved timeless, allowing reinterpretation across media while maintaining recognition. The mythology established around legendary Pokémon, Articuno, Zapdos, Moltres representing ice, lightning, and fire, Mewtwo as artificially created ultimate, Pokémon added depth to world beyond simple monster collection. This mythology would expand dramatically in later games. The balanced difficulty, allowing children to complete the game while providing challenge for experienced players, was carefully calibrated. The game wasn't so hard as to frustrate young players, nor so easy as to bore older ones. This balance contributed to broad appeal. The replay value came not from mechanical variety, but from team composition possibilities. With 151 Pokémon, countless team combinations existed. Each playthrough could use different Pokémon, creating fresh experiences from same content. The speedrunning potential discovered years later demonstrated hidden depth in the game's mechanics. Players found exploits and routes, allowing completion in minutes. This technical mastery of game systems shows the complexity beneath simple surface. The cultural phenomenon that was Pokemania, the intense popularity in late 90s and as early 2000s, was unprecedented for a video game franchise. The level of mainstream penetration was remarkable. Everyone knew Pokemon, even if they didn't play games. The franchise's ability to appeal across age groups, children, teenagers, adults, defied conventional wisdom about target audiences. While marketed to children, Pokemon engaged older players through depth and nostalgia. This broad appeal sustained success. The academic study of Pokemon's success analyzes various factors: timing, marketing, gameplay, social features, transmedia strategy. Scholars study Pokémon as case study in entertainment industry success. The games merit serious analysis despite simple appearance. The preservation of Red and Blue through Virtual Console and potential future re-releases ensures new generations can experience the originals. While remakes exist, the original games have historical value worth preserving. Gaming's history includes these foundational titles. The ROM hacking. Community keeping Red and Blue relevant through modifications demonstrates passionate fan engagement. These unofficial versions create new challenges and experiences from familiar foundation. The community's creativity extends the game's life indefinitely. The memes and internet culture surrounding Red and Blue's quirks, missing no, the gotta catch them all slogan, specific Pokemon like Magikarp show how games permeate internet culture. Pokemon references remain common in online spaces decades after release. The influence on other media, other video games borrowing mechanics, anime influenced by Pokemon's success, trading card games inspired by Pokemon TCG, demonstrates broad cultural impact. The ripple effects extend far beyond the original games. The educational value, teaching children about type matching, resource management, strategic planning, and reading comprehension through engaging gameplay, gave parents reason to support children's interest. Pokemon wasn't just entertainment but learning tool. The social skills developed through trading and battling, negotiation, communication, sportsmanship, cooperation, added value beyond digital play. The games facilitated real-world social development through their mechanics. The creative inspiration provided to young players who would become game developers, artists, musicians, and writers influenced a generation of creators. Many professional creatives cite Pokemon as formative influence on their career paths. The economic impact through game sales, merchandise, license fees, and related industries generated billions in economic activity. Pokemon employed thousands through Game Freak, Nintendo, the Pokemon Company, licensees, and retailers. The economic footprint was enormous. The tourism impact, with Pokemon centers in Japan becoming tourist destinations and Pokemon Go creating location-based tourism, shows real-world economic effects beyond direct sales. The franchise influences behavior and commerce in unexpected ways. The charitable work done through Pokemon partnerships, using the brand's appeal to support various causes, demonstrates positive social impact. The franchise's reach enables charitable initiatives affecting many lives. The representation questions raised by Pokemon, anthropomorphization of animals, treatment of creatures, environmental themes, spark philosophical discussions. The games, while simple, touch on complex topics worth examining. The accessibility for players with different abilities varies. Red and Blue weren't designed with accessibility in mind, but their simple controls and turn-based gameplay made them playable for many. Modern remakes have added accessibility features, honoring originals while expanding access. The historical context of 1990s gaming culture is important for understanding Red and Blue's reception. The games arrived when home consoles were transitioning to 3D graphics, making 2D handheld RPGs seem outdated. Their success, despite this timing, shows strength of concept. The role of luck alongside skill in Pokemon's success must be acknowledged. The games were good, but timing, marketing, cultural factors, and chance all contributed. Success at Pokemon's level requires both merit and fortune. The human stories behind the games, developers working without pay, personal sacrifices made for the project, relationships formed during development, add depth to understanding Red and Blue. These were labors of love, not just commercial products. The alternative history where Pokémon failed is interesting to consider. What would have happened to Game Freak? Would another creature-collecting game have succeeded instead? How would gaming and popular culture be different? The counterfactual highlights how Pokémon shaped our timeline. The final message of Red and Blue about exploration, discovery, friendship, and perseverance remains relevant. The games encouraged players to venture into unknown, to collect and cherish discoveries, to share with friends, to never give up. These themes transcend the medium. Now, as you drift towards sleep, think about the journey from Satoshi's childhood in Machida to global phenomenon. Consider the Beatles sleeping beneath stones, the arcade halls filled with electronic wonder, the handwritten magazines that became communities. Reflect on the 6 years of struggle, the near cancellations, the impossible technical challenges overcome through determination. Remember that sometimes the most unlikely ideas, pursued with passion despite all obstacles, create something that touches millions of lives across the world. The story of Pokémon Red and Blue is the story of persistence, creativity, and vision. It's about childhood wonder finding new expression. It's about taking risks on unconventional ideas. It's about community and sharing. It's about games as more than entertainment, as shared cultural experiences that define generations. Close your eyes now. Let the Pokémon theme drift through your thoughts. Imagine a world of 151 creatures waiting to be discovered. Imagine the link cable connecting you to friends. Imagine the satisfaction of finally catching that rare Pokémon after patient searching. Imagine becoming champion. Sleep well, trainer. Tomorrow you can continue your journey, but tonight, rest. The Pokémon Center music plays softly, promising rest and recovery. The nurse says your Pokémon are healed. All is well. The journey of Pokémon Red and Blue, from concept to reality, mirrors the very adventure the games present to players. Both are stories of a small beginning growing into something vast. Both involve overcoming obstacles, discovering hidden strengths, and achieving what seemed impossible. The parallel between Satoshi's childhood explorations and the player's journey through Kanto is intentional. Satoshi wanted players to feel what he felt as a child, the thrill of discovering something hidden, the satisfaction of careful observation paying off, the joy of sharing discoveries with friends. He succeeded in translating those physical experiences into digital form. The Game Boy itself was perfect medium for this translation. Its portability meant Pokémon could accompany players anywhere, like how Satoshi carried insects in jars. The link cable's physicality meant sharing required meeting in person, like how he traded insects with neighborhood children. The technology served the vision. The limitation of black and white graphics forced players to imagine colors, to envision their Pokémon more vividly than any screen could display. This engagement of imagination was feature, not bug. Players participated in creating their Pokémon's reality through mental visualization. The sound design, working within severe hardware limitations, used repetition and melody to create earworms that would stay with players for decades. The battle music's urgency, the Pokémon Center's comfort, the cycling music's momentum, each communicated feeling through simple beeps and tones. The text-based dialogue allowed players to read at their own pace, to imagine voices and inflections. This personalization made every player's experience unique. Your Professor Oak might sound different from another player's, both valid interpretations of same text. The strategic depth emerged from relatively simple systems interacting in complex ways. Type advantages, stat calculations, move selection, team composition, these elements combine to create near infinite strategic possibilities, despite the Game Boy's limitations. The collection aspect tapped into fundamental human psychology. The satisfaction of completion, the drive to fill gaps, the pleasure of organization, these drives are powerful. Pokémon channeled them into engaging gameplay that could sustain interest for hundreds of hours. The social aspect addressed human need for connection and community. Trading wasn't just mechanical necessity, but social ritual. Battling friends was friendly competition, strengthening bonds. The games facilitated relationships in meaningful ways. The progression from Pallet Town to Indigo Plateau mirrors personal growth and coming-of-age narratives. You start as nobody in small town, venture into wider world, face challenges, grow stronger, and eventually reach pinnacle of achievement. This archetypal journey resonates across cultures. The monsters you collect become companions on this journey. Unlike party members in traditional RPGs, you choose your companions from vast roster. This agency creates personal connection. Your team reflects your choices, your preferences, your strategy. Your Pokémon are uniquely yours. The rival's presence provides competitive drive and personal stakes. He's not evil like Team Rocket, but represents alternative path, different choices leading to different results. Your rivalry pushes both of you to improve, classic shonen anime trope translated to gameplay. The gym leaders serve as masters, teaching lessons through combat. Each specializes in type, demonstrating mastery through focused expertise. Defeating them proves you've learned the lessons, earned the right to progress. This mentor-student dynamic adds narrative weight to battles. The legendary Pokémon represent peak challenges, rarest discoveries. Finding them requires exploration and persistence. Catching them demands strategy and patience. Owning them provides status and satisfaction, their ultimate expression of collection and mastery drives. The Pokédex serves as your guide and record. Professor Oak's dream becomes yours. Completing it proves mastery of the entire game. The percentage complete provides constant feedback, motivation to continue exploring and catching. The choice to make certain moves permanently learnable through HMs creates commitment. You can't easily undo teaching Cut to Charizard. This forces thoughtful decision-making, makes choices matter. Modern games often remove this friction, but it added weight to decisions. The limited bag space forces prioritization. You can't carry unlimited items, must choose what's important. This resource management adds a strategic layer to preparation. Modern games often expand inventory dramatically, reducing this tension. The finite money from trainer battles creates economic constraint. You can't grind infinitely for money, must manage finances carefully. This adds stakes to shopping decisions, makes spending meaningful. Later games with rematchable trainers remove this limit. The permanent trainer defeats mean you can't overlevel by grinding the same trainers repeatedly. This keeps pacing tighter, prevents trivializing difficulty through excessive grinding. The design respects players' time while maintaining challenge. The Pokémon storage system, though clunky, allows maintaining collection beyond 6 Pokémon party limit. The boxes, filling up with caught Pokémon, provides tangible sense of growing collection. Organizing boxes becomes part of collection management experience. The naming feature allows personalizing your Pokémon. Giving nicknames creates emotional attachment. Your Pikachu, named personally, becomes more meaningful than generic Pikachu. This simple feature deepens connection between player and Pokémon. The inability to rename traded Pokémon preserves original trainer's naming choice, creating history. The Pokémon retains trace of previous owner, adding narrative to each traded creature. They're not just data, but objects with provenance. The different starter paths create 3 distinct early game experiences. Choosing Charmander means struggling against Brock and Misty. Choosing Bulbasaur makes early game easier. Choosing Squirtle provides balance. These difficulty variations add replay value. The hidden items scattered throughout Kanto reward thorough exploration. Finding full restore. Tucked in corner of building feels like discovering secret. These rewards encourage checking every tile, talking to every NPC, exploring thoroughly. The fishing mechanic adds another collection avenue. Different rods access different Pokémon. Fishing in different locations yields different species. This simple minigame integrates naturally into exploration and collection gameplay. The variety of Pokeballs, Standard, Great, Ultra, Master, creates hierarchy and choice. Early game, standard balls are sufficient. Later, stronger Pokémon require better balls. The Master Ball is precious one-use guarantee, creating agonizing decision about when to use it. The status condition lasting outside battle adds consequence to poisoning. Watching your Pokémon's HP drain while walking creates urgency to reach Pokémon Center or use antidote. This persistence makes status feel more dangerous than if it only affected battles. The daycare's simple leveling service provides alternative to grinding. Leave a Pokémon, walk around, return to find it leveled. This convenience option respects different player preferences for leveling methods. The bike providing fast travel reduces tedium when backtracking. The game respects players' time by offering movement speed increase. This quality of life feature makes exploration more enjoyable. The item finder, helping locate hidden items, reduces frustration of missing collectibles. The tool provides middle ground between checking every tile manually and having items clearly visible. It rewards exploration without requiring excessive tedium. The Pokémon sprites, though simple, conveyed personality effectively. Pikachu's cute design, Charizard's fierce stance, Mewtwo's alien appearance, each sprite communicated character within severe pixel limitations. Strong design principles overcame technical constraints. The battle sprites showed Pokémon from behind, creating perspective that you stand with them in battle. This viewpoint reinforces partnership between trainer and Pokémon. You're not commanding distant units, but fighting alongside companions. The move animations, though basic, provided visual feedback for attacks. Splash showing water, Ember showing fire, Thunder showing lightning. These simple effects communicated attack types clearly. The imagination filled in details sprites couldn't show. The critical hit system's randomness added unpredictability, preventing battles from becoming purely mathematical. Sometimes weaker Pokémon could defeat stronger ones through lucky critical hit. This hope kept underdog viable, made every battle potentially winnable. The experience system, encouraging using multiple Pokémon rather than over-leveling one, prevented degenerate strategies. While possible to solo the game with starter Pokémon, using balanced team was more effective. The system encouraged engaging with collection mechanics. The type chart's logic mostly made intuitive sense. Water extinguishes fire. Fire burns grass. Grass absorbs water. These relationships felt natural. Some matchups were less obvious. Why is Psychic weak to Bug? But most made logical sense. The dual-type Pokémon created interesting strategic considerations. Charizard being fire, flying, means water is super effective, but also quadruples rock damage weakness. These type combinations added depth to team building and battling. The move pools allowing Pokémon to learn moves outside their type provided coverage options. Pikachu learning Iron Tail, Lapras learning Thunder, Gyarados learning Hyper Beam. These options allowed countering type disadvantages. The stat distribution making some Pokémon better at physical attacks, others at special attacks, created specialization. Alakazam's high special but low attack meant using special moves. Machamp's high attack but low special meant using physical moves. Understanding these patterns was key to optimal play. The speed stat determining turn order added another strategic layer. Fast Pokémon move first, potentially defeating opponents before taking damage. Slow Pokémon must endure hits before attacking. Speed became crucial stat for competitive play. The held item's absence in Red and Blue simplified battles compared to later games. Strategies focused purely on Pokémon, moves, and stats without the item effects. This simplicity was more accessible, but less strategically deep. The breeding system's absence meant every Pokémon was caught or received as gift. This simplified acquisition, but prevented passing down moves or optimizing stats through breeding. Competitive players in later games would use breeding extensively. The ability's absence meant Pokémon of same species were more similar than in later games. 2. Charizard differed only in stats and moves, not in abilities. This reduced strategic diversity, but simplified understanding each Pokémon. The physical special split not existing meant some Pokémon couldn't effectively use their type. Gyarados, with high attack, couldn't use physical water moves because all water moves were special. This limitation was addressed in later generations. The competitive scene that emerged from Red and Blue proved the battle system's depth despite limitations. Players found viable strategies, developed metagames, created tier systems. The game supported competitive play developers didn't fully anticipate. The speedrunning community's discoveries revealed the game's underlying mechanics and glitches. Speedrunners found exploits, allowing completion in minutes, showcasing deep understanding of game systems and programming quirks. The randomizer community keeping Red and Blue fresh through modifications shows enduring appeal. Randomizing Pokémon locations, types, and movesets creates new challenges from familiar foundation. Players continue finding new ways to enjoy the games. The ROM hacking scene's creations, ranging from minor tweaks to total conversions, demonstrate passionate engagement. Fans create the content they want, extending the game's life indefinitely through community creativity. The nostalgic replays by adults who played as children create different experience than childhood playthroughs. Understanding systems more deeply, recognizing design choices, appreciating constraints, adult players engage differently than children did. The introduction of younger generations to Red and Blue through remakes or virtual console creates bridge across age groups. Parents share childhood favorites with children, creating shared experiences across generations. The academic analysis examining Red and Blue's success from various perspectives: game design, psychology, economics, sociology, treats the games as worthy of serious study. They're not just entertainment, but cultural phenomena deserving scholarly attention. The preservation efforts, ensuring red and blue remain playable as technology advances, serves gaming history. These games are culturally significant, worth preserving for future generations to experience and study. The influence on creators who grew up with red and blue shapes modern gaming. Developers, artists, musicians, writers cite Pokémon as formative influence. The games inspire new generations of creators. The economic impact through direct sales, merchandise, licenses, and tourism generates billions annually. Pokémon is among the highest grossing media franchises ever created. The economic engine started by Red and Blue continues strong. The charitable work using Pokémon's brand appeal supports various causes. The franchise's reach enables raising awareness and funds for important issues. This positive social impact extends beyond entertainment value. The environmental themes in Pokémon's narrative raise awareness of nature and conservation. While subtle in Red and Blue, these themes become more prominent in later games. The franchise encourages appreciation for biodiversity and ecosystems. The representation of different cultures through regional variations in later games stems from Red and Blue's foundation. Kanto represents Japan. Later regions represent other parts of the world. This global perspective promotes cultural understanding. The accessibility improvements in later games, including options for players with disabilities, make Pokémon more inclusive. While Red and Blue lacked these features, the franchise has evolved to welcome more players. The competitive integrity maintained through ban lists and tier systems allows fair play despite power imbalances. The community regulates itself to preserve competitive enjoyment. This self-governance demonstrates mature community engagement. The social bonds formed through Pokémon last beyond the games. Friendships forged over trading and battling can last lifetimes. The games facilitate connections that outlive any individual playthrough. The memories created through Pokémon become part of personal history. First, Pokémon caught. First Elite Four victory. First legendary captured. These moments stay with players for decades. The games create lasting memories. The life lessons about perseverance, strategy, resource management, and sportsmanship provide value beyond entertainment. The games teach through engagement, making lessons memorable through experience. The creativity sparked by Pokémon manifests in fan art, fan fiction, fan games, and more. The franchise inspires creative expression across media. Players become creators, extending Pokémon's cultural impact. The community knowledge sharing through guides, forums, and videos builds collective expertise. Players help each other, share discoveries, solve problems together. This collaborative learning enriches the experience. The tradition of new Pokémon generations releasing regularly maintains cultural presence across decades. Each new generation brings new players while retaining existing fans. The franchise evolves while maintaining core appeal. The transmedia strategy with games, anime, movies, cards, and merchandise creates multiple entry points. People can engage with Pokémon through preferred media, potentially exploring other formats later. This flexibility broadens appeal. The narrative consistency across media creates a cohesive universe. While details vary between game, anime, and manga versions, core concepts remain consistent. This consistency reinforces world building across formats. The character development possible through long-running anime series adds depth to characters introduced in games. Ash's journey across hundreds of episodes provides character growth impossible in the game's limited narrative. The mythology expansion through movies explores legendary Pokémon lore. The films delve deeper into mysteries hinted at in games, enriching the world's backstory and adding narrative complexity. The strategic depth in trading card game provides different competitive outlet than video games. Card game requires different skills: deck building, probability assessment, bluffing. This diversity allows different types of strategic thinking. The collecting aspect of physical cards parallels video game collection, but with tangible objects. Cards can be displayed, traded physically, appreciated as physical art. This materiality creates different collecting experience. The social nature of card game battles requires face-to-face interaction. Like link cable battles, but with different mechanics, card game battles create personal social experiences in digital age. The artistic appreciation possible with illustrated cards treats Pokémon art as collectible. Some cards become valuable for artistic merit beyond game utility. This elevates Pokémon to art collectible status. The investment aspect of rare cards creates alternative value system. Some Pokémon cards sell for thousands of dollars. This financial value adds another dimension to collection beyond personal enjoyment. The nostalgia market for original red and blue cartridges shows enduring affection. Original Game Boy cartridges sell for significant prices. Physical game ownership becomes collectible, separate from ability to play. The speedrunning records constantly improving demonstrates ongoing optimization of known game. Even decades later, players find new strategies, shave seconds off times. The pursuit of perfection continues. The challenge runs with self-imposed restrictions create new experiences from old game. Nuzlocke challenges, monotype runs, no items runs. These variants add difficulty and variety. Players create their own challenges. The theoretical optimization discussions analyzing perfect strategies showcase depth. What's mathematically optimal team? What's fastest possible completion? These questions drive analysis and experimentation. The glitch exhibition videos showcasing Red and Blue's numerous bugs serve both entertainment and education. Seeing bizarre glitches demonstrates the game's technical quirks. These videos preserve knowledge of the game's programming oddities. The retrospective analyses comparing Red and Blue to later games provide historical perspective. Understanding how the franchise evolved highlights what changed and what remained constant. This historical view contextualizes the series. The critical reevaluations judging Red and Blue by modern standards versus historical context spark interesting debates. Are they still good games or just important games? Does nostalgia cloud judgment? These discussions examine the games critically. The educational use of Pokémon in classrooms demonstrates versatility. Teachers use Pokémon to teach reading, math, biology, strategy. The game's appeal makes education more engaging. The psychological research studying Pokémon's appeal reveals insights into human behavior. Why do collecting mechanics engage us? What makes characters appealing? These questions apply beyond gaming. The economic studies examining Pokémon's business model provide case study in franchise building. How did one game become multi-billion-dollar empire? The strategy offers lessons for media businesses. The sociological analysis of Pokémon communities reveals how shared interests create belonging. Communities form around common passion, creating social structures and hierarchies. Pokémon communities exemplify fan culture dynamics. The philosophical questions about Pokémon's ethics spark interesting discussions. Is capturing and battling creatures ethical? What does the Pokémon world say about our relationship with nature? These questions have no easy answers, but provoke thought. The artistic merit of Pokemon's design, music, and world building deserves recognition. While created for children, the artistry displays skill and creativity. Game design is art, and Pokemon exemplifies thoughtful, artistic creation. The technical achievement of fitting so much content into Game Boy cartridge impresses from software engineering perspective. The compression, optimization, and clever programming enabled impossible-seeming feat. This technical excellence merits appreciation. The longevity surpassing most entertainment franchises demonstrates exceptional appeal. Most franchises fade after few years. Pokemon thrives across decades. This sustained success is rare and noteworthy. The cross-generational appeal bringing together children, parents, and grandparents is remarkable. Few franchises span generations effectively. Pokemon creates shared experiences across age groups. The global reach transcending cultural boundaries proves universal appeal. The game succeeded in Asia, Americas, Europe, and beyond. This worldwide success demonstrates Pokemon's cross-cultural resonance. The adaptation to new technologies from Game Boy to modern systems shows franchise flexibility. Pokemon evolves with technology while maintaining core identity. This adaptability ensures ongoing relevance. The future seems secure with new games, media, and products continuously releasing. Pokemon shows no signs of slowing. The foundation built by Red and Blue supports expanding empire. The legacy of Red and Blue persists in every Pokemon game. The core mechanics, the fundamental appeal, the design philosophy all trace back to the originals. Every Pokemon game builds on Red and Blue's foundation. The inspiration provided to aspiring game developers shows cultural impact beyond entertainment. Young people see Red and Blue's success and dream of creating similarly impactful games. The games inspire next generation of creators. The joy brought to millions of players across decades represents meaningful positive impact. Entertainment has value. Happiness has value. Red and Blue created immense joy, a worthy accomplishment. The friendships formed, memories created, lessons learned, and lives touched. These intangible benefits matter more than sales figures or critical acclaim. Red and Blue affected real people in meaningful ways. The story of how Pokemon Red and Blue were made is fundamentally human story. It's about passion, perseverance, creativity, collaboration, risk-taking, and belief in vision despite obstacles. These human elements make the story resonate beyond gaming context. Satoshi's journey from insect collecting child to game creator to cultural icon demonstrates how childhood passions can shape life's work. His ability to translate personal joy into shared experience benefited millions. Ken's artistic vision, giving visual identity to Satoshi's concepts, shows importance of collaboration. Great works often require multiple talents, combining synergistically. Ken and Satoshi's partnership exemplifies a creative collaboration. Junichi's musical compositions, elevating simple games into memorable experiences, demonstrates music's power. The right soundtrack enhances emotional impact tremendously. Junichi's contributions were essential to Pokemon's success. The team's collective sacrifice and dedication enabled the impossible. Working without pay, sleeping in office, believing when others doubted, their commitment made dreams reality. Their story inspires anyone facing difficult creative challenges. Nintendo's support, even when not fully understanding the concept, shows value of trusting creators. Companies that empower creative vision enable great works. Nintendo's faith was rewarded beyond expectations. The fans who embraced Pokémon, who traded and battled and collected, completed the circle. Without players engaging deeply with the games, Pokémon would have failed. The community's enthusiasm transformed good games into cultural phenomenon. As you close your eyes tonight, remember that every great achievement begins with simple dream. Satoshi dreamed of sharing childhood joy. Through years of effort, that dream touched hundreds of millions of people. Remember that obstacles are inevitable but surmountable. Financial problems, technical limitations, skepticism, all these challenged Pokemon's creation. Perseverance overcame them all. Remember that innovation often comes from constraints. The Game Boy's limitations forced creativity. Those creative solutions became strengths. Constraints can catalyze innovation if approached correctly. Remember that community amplifies individual experience. Pokémon alone was fun. Pokémon with friends was magical. Shared experiences create bonds and memories beyond what solo activities can. Remember that simple ideas executed well can change the world. Pokémon's core concept isn't complex, but the execution, the care, the attention to detail, these made simplicity profound. Remember that childhood wonder, that sense of discovery, that joy of exploration. These feelings don't disappear with age. Pokémon proved that games could evoke them, could return adults to childlike wonder. Remember that the journey matters as much as destination. Completing the Pokédex was goal, but the adventure of collecting each Pokémon created the real value. Process brings joy, not just achievement. Remember that what seems impossible today may become reality tomorrow. Pokémon seemed impossible many times during development. Yet here we are, decades later, discussing one of the most successful franchises ever. Let these lessons drift with you into sleep. Let the gentle sounds of Pokémon centers lull you into rest. Let the memory of your first Pikachu bring a smile as consciousness fades. Good night, trainer. Your Pokémon are healed and ready for tomorrow's adventures. But tonight, rest. Dream of unexplored routes, undiscovered caves, uncaught Pokémon waiting to be found. Dream of the thrill of finding that rare Pokémon after patient searching. Dream of the satisfaction of defeating a difficult gym leader. Dream of the pride of completing your Pokédex. Dream of connecting Game Boys with friends, of trading that final Pokémon needed for completion, of battling and laughing together. Dream of the bonds formed through shared adventure. Dream of a world where nature and technology coexist, where creatures of imagination feel real, where children can explore and discover without danger. Dream of Pokémon. Sleep now. The journey continues tomorrow. New adventures await, new Pokémon to catch, new challenges to overcome. But tonight, rest in the knowledge that somewhere in Kanto, your team waits safely in the PC, ready for whatever comes next. Thank you for joining this journey through Pokémon Red and Blue's creation. If you found peace in this story of creation and perseverance, please like and subscribe for more journeys through gaming history. Until next time, may your dreams be filled with the wonder of discovery and the joy of shared adventure. Good night.